Join me every month for the inspiration to find your finish line. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Find Your Finish Line. I'm Mike Riley, the podcast that helps you get to where you want to go. I talk to all kinds of people from all walks of life that have jumped over a lot of hurdles to even get to their start line and then to get to that coveted finish line. And hopefully those stories will help inspire you to get off the couch and find your finish line. My guest today, I'm very excited about this. He's a dear friend, a mentor, an advisor, an all-around good guy. As a matter of fact, he wrote the foreword to my book, and he always says that got better reviews than my book. He's usually the one on the other side of the microphone asking the questions, but this is a switch. He talks to all kinds of people. What's the most famous people in endurance sports he's interviewed? His famous Global Breakfast with Bob show. I'm sure you've all seen it. Bob Babbitt, welcome to Find Your Finish Line.
Oh, Mikey, always such a pleasure to chat. I don't think we need microphones. You and I could just sit here and chat for 7-8 hours and never come up for air and don't even notice that people aren't watching anymore. They don't even care. But
everybody knew, we got on about 10 minutes before and we just kept talking. I go, well, we better go live now. Well, I asked all my guests right up front, Bob, but this is going to be an interesting one for you to answer because we both live in San Diego and it's raining cats and dogs, but I always ask right off, did you get a workout in today?
I did. Actually, I've started on this because as I've gotten older, you start going, okay, I'm doing a lot of races. In 2019, I think I raced 36 times.
Wow.
I just love racing. I love being out there. The coolest thing is, if you want to stay young, hang out with young people. Go out to races. If we hang out with people our own age, what happens is all you talk about is medication and all you talk about is people who've had different types of awful things happen to them. Hang out with young people, you talk about racing. And we get out, we have our 60 to death group that goes to every race. And we're standing there in at the racks before the race start. And every week we'll say, it's 4:30 in the morning. Why do we do this? Because we can. That's why, because we love it. Because by 8 in the morning, we're in a beer garden. There's nothing better in the world. We've gotten our work in. The rest of the world is sleeping, and we're in a beer garden toasting the fact that we've just got through another race, and we get to do it again the following week.
So what was your workout today?
Oh, I went to there's a place called Stride, which is, think about a spin class with treadmills. There's like 25 treadmills in there, and it's like a 55-minute workout, and you're doing 2 and 3 minute intervals throughout the whole workout, and I love it. You're wearing a heart monitor, and they're telling you you're going 2% incline. You're going 45 seconds, and then you're going 3%. And it's just a lot of fun. It flies. I like it when people tell me what to do. It makes the workout go really fast. Otherwise, I get bored.
Yeah, I did the smart trainer in the garage this morning before light, obviously, and that's one thing I don't think I'll ever be able to not get up early. But I was doing that, and I go, God, I wish it was like 2 or 3 people next to me here, because by yourself, it's a push. It's tough, and a lot of people have pain caves out there, and that's what they do. They've got to do their workouts through the wintertime by themselves. Well, Bob, let's start by taking a look back. You were turned on to endurance sports early, when you were a teacher here in San Diego.
Yeah.
Tell us that story. What was that fire that all of a sudden was lit when you saw what Swim Bike Run was all about, when you knew what running was all about? What was that light that switched on for you?
When we first moved out here from Chicago, I moved out here in 78 and was running a PE program at a place called the Children's School. And there was the scene here was 10Ks every weekend,
Yeah.
And we'd go down and we'd just run these 10Ks, and you'd develop this social group, and you'd follow people around, and you'd go to races every weekend. And I started really loving it. And then the track club of San Diego Track Club was putting on these little triathlons. They couldn't even spell the word. The first trophies was TRIATHALON. They used a bowling trophy, I think. And we were doing these little swim bike runs around Fiesta Island. It wasn't even a sport. It was just sort of a workout for the track club. and I really loved it. My roommate at the time was a guy named Ned Overend, and Ned went on to become world mountain bike champion, but mountain bikes didn't exist at that point.
No.
He was working at San Diego Suzuki. I was a school teacher. We'd go out to local 5Ks and 10Ks, and every once in a while a marathon. And it was just, the running scene in San Diego was crazy. You look at guys, you look at the times that people were running back in the late 70s and early 80s, the fields were so deep. If you were running a 2:25 marathon, you were like 80th in these races. People were so fast. But it was something about the community that I loved. And it led to us reading an article in Sports Illustrated in 1979 about this silly event called the Ironman Triathlon. And Sports Illustrated was the Bible. It came out every Thursday, and all of a sudden there's an article, 8-page article about this event over in Oahu. And the guy who won this 2.4-mile swim, 112-mile bike ride, 26.2-mile run was a guy named Tom Warren, who Ned and I had met because we had done his swim event called Tugs down in Mission Beach. So Pacific Beach. So when we read about that and we're thinking, well, let's see if we can go do it. But you couldn't go online and find out how to sign up for something. We had to track him down. So I call him up and said, Mr. Warren, sir, can Ned and I come down to find out about this iron thing? And he said, sure, Babbitt, come on down to Crystal Pier. We're just south of Crystal Pier on the west side of the street's my office. And we get down there. There's no office. There's a motorhome, right? There's a bike on the back. There's a paddleboard on top. He's got running shoes tied around the side view mirror. And I sort of stick my head inside the motorhome and was like, Babbitt, welcome to my office. And he proceeded to tell us about, hey, you need to get a bicycle. It's not a bad thing to start. And we walked to a bar. And what he would do is he'd go for a run every morning. He'd run 5 miles down to this place called the Mission Beach Jetty and back. And then he'd paddle out in the ocean. And then he'd ride his bike up the Oceanside. That was basically his lifestyle. That's what he did. So he took us to the bar behind him called T.D. Hayes, which was open at 9 in the morning. Mm-hmm. And we're sitting with him, and he's drinking beer at 9 in the morning. And he's got a magic marker with him. And it's like he's got this magic marker, and every time he takes a drink, he's making a mark on his arm. And he's our mentor, right? He's going to teach us about this Ironman thing. So we didn't know eccentric. We just thought, okay, we need to know this stuff. Mr. Warren, sir, what's the deal with the magic marker? He goes, well, I have a drinking problem, so I make a mark on my arm. When I get to my sleeve, I go home. And we're like, okay. So we go to his house. He's got a trainer mounted in his sauna. He has a sauna in his house. And he's riding the thing for 5 hours a day to get ready for this iron thing. So we ended up going to a police auction, Ned and I got a bike for $75. The whole back end of the bike had been on fire. So it was all charred on the back end. And had a fuzzy raccoon seat cover and had foam grips and this Radio Shack radio that we had on the front so I could bungee cord it on and listen to tunes. But we had no idea. We went out riding. I remember there was a guy in town, Dale Sutton, and he was doing triathlon stuff, and we went riding with him, and we're going, gosh, you know what? We're probably going to average 10 miles an hour. We'll be out there 12. There's no way you do this in one day. We'd be riding in the dark. So went out and got panniers, sleeping bag, and tent, and I thought you swam 2.4, rode 56, camped out, rode back the next day, and ran the marathon, which in hindsight is a pretty hell of a good idea compared to what you do now.
Yeah.
So that led to us going over in 1980. And, I was race number 3 because I was the third guy to send my $25 in. The year before, there was only 15 starters and 12 finishers in 1980. Because of the article in Sports Illustrated, there's 108 of us. The thing was booming. And so you had to have a support crew. You were on the island of Oahu. There was no aid stations. There was no roads blocked off. They had, Dave Scott was in that race. That ended up being his first win. Dave McGilvery, longtime Boston race director, was in that race. John Howard, cyclist of the 70s, was in that race. And we had no idea what we were doing. So I get out there that morning, and they we had to swim 4 lengths in this Alamoana Channel because the surf was so big they thought we were going to die. They moved it to Alamoana Channel the night before the race, and I'm swimming along, and not the most efficient open water swimmer. Swimming along those 4 lengths, I go down, and on my way back, I almost hit this guy. His name was John Huckabee, the Incredible Huck, who was walking the entire swim. He was knee deep walking, and he's the only guy in the history of Ironman to get blisters on his feet during the swim portion of the Ironman triathlon. And get out of the water, and there's my crew. And I get, I'm on my bike, I'm tuning in my radio, and I'm thinking this is the coolest thing ever. Get to mile 25, there's my crew on the side of the road. I'm thinking, oh my God, it's going to be like the Tour de France. They're going to give me a handoff. They did. Big Mac fries and a Coke. Brown bag in it at 25 miles. Root beer snow cone at mile 90. It was an adventure. And then coming in at the end of the bike, you come in and I hear this music. And I'm like, what's going on? My crew had a bamboo mat laid out. And they had a boombox. And they're like, how about a massage? I'm like, you know what? I am really tight right now after 112 miles on that bike. Oh, and I had flat-proof tires on there, solid rubber tires, because I didn't know how to change a flat. So my neck is sore, my back is sore. I got a 45-minute massage between the bike and the run, and then it was off on the marathon. And now I'm playing with house money because I thought I was going to finish this thing in 2 days. I'm already off the bike ride and it's still light out. So I'm running along, and again, no roads are blocked off, and they had scales on the course. You had to get off your bike, and then during the run, if you lost 5% of your body weight, they weighed you before the race. If you lost 5% of your body weight, they pulled you out of the race.
And they did that for quite a few years, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
So I get on. That's what makes John Howard's time in 1980 even more impressive. The fact he got off his bike 4 times to do it. So my food of choice, because who knew about nutrition? I had Hawaiian sweetbread and Gatorade. That was it. So I'm eating Hawaiian sweetbread and basically waddling through Waikiki, eating my Hawaiian sweetbread. They weighed me when I started the run. I get to about mile 5, and I can hear the guy in a walkie-talkie when I got on the scale. He's like, can you give me that again? He's gained 5 pounds. You can't gain weight doing this silly thing. And then we get to Diamond Head, and my crew, to this day I remember, they're in a Fiat convertible following me up Diamond Head. And I'm thinking to myself, man, this is so cool. There's going to be bands at the finish. There's going to be cheerleaders. This is going to be the greatest thing ever. Come down in the Kapiolani Park, and I see a light bulb above me and a chalk line. And I sort of slow down. And I hear this voice in the darkness. He's like, hey, you. I'm like, yeah. You in the race? Yeah. You're done. That was it. There was no Mike Riley calling me in. There was no cheerleaders. There was no band. There was one idiot doing one-arm push-ups in the park and me. That was it. But I knew that event had changed my life. There was something about that thing that just resonated, and I knew that I had to get more involved and hopefully help grow this sport, because the feeling I had right then was a feeling I wanted other people to have as well.
Well, Bob, it's interesting because that story and the passion you had early on, but not everybody transforms that into the business side. How can I produce income doing this sport? How can I be a part of it during the day during the work day? And you did that, with your writing, working with Running Triathlon News and Competitor. Did you ever think in a million years your profession would be endurance sports?
You know what I've learned over time, both with Competitor and with Triathlon and with CAF, is a lot of times you go to school, you get your MBA, you have a business plan. Life isn't always about a business plan. Life is about following your gut. And when I came back after finishing that Ironman, I tracked down Mike Plant, who had a magazine called San Diego Track Club News and became Running News. And then I became LA editor for Running and Triathlon News. Based on the 100 idiots that had done this triathlon, Mike was kind enough to change the name to Running and Triathlon News. And he had covered the early triathlons at Fiesta Island and saw the future of this sport. But not a lot of people did. And so we were Lois Schwartz, who was the art teacher at Competitor at children's school where I taught. She wanted to learn photography. So Lois and I would drive to LA every weekend and cover 5Ks and 10Ks and meet the people up there. And ironically, one of the first people we met was this wheelchair racer by the name of Jim Knopp, who was an Olympic trials pole vaulter. And this is 1988. This is long before we had Challenge Athletes Foundation.
Right.
1988, I wanted Jimmy to be on the cover of Competitor magazine. I felt there was something unique about the stories of the athletes who were overcoming, right? You and I both believe the power of sport to overcome obstacles. And I remember interviewing Jimmy at his house. And back then they were racing on wheelchairs that looked like shopping carts. They were like 4-wheel things. They had him on the cover of the magazine. And I was like, you can't put a guy in a wheelchair on the cover of the magazine. Who's going to pick the thing up? Well, the pickup rate was great. People resonated. The story resonated. And when I first interviewed Jimmy, I went to his house. And I'm sitting there, and there's a nickel on the floor. And I'm thinking to myself, God, the poor guy, he dropped a nickel and he can't reach down and get it. So I go to pick up the nickel. It's glued to the floor. And there's Jim Knopp sitting drinking a beer, and he's looking at me, and he's going, so Babbitt, you didn't think the poor cripple could pick up the nickel off the floor. Lesson number 1, don't underestimate anybody. That's something that resonates with me every day of my life, is don't underestimate anybody in their ability to accomplish whatever the hell they want to accomplish. And so Jimmy was the one who taught me about disability and talked to me about overcoming and talked to me about, hey, you know what? When I'm in a wheelchair, I'm the same as everybody else. I'm trying to get from point A to point B. I want to kick somebody's butt, right? And he won Boston Marathon 5 times. He won LA Marathon 3 times. He really he made wheelchair racing exciting. He's wearing a Dalmatian skin suit. He's out there with David Bailey, former motocross world champion, doing pieces for MTV Sports. They changed everything. And I love the fact that we could do that. And at the same time, when we started Competitor Magazine, Running and Triathlon News had gone out of business. And I went with Lois to go meet with California Bicycling Magazine and Southwest Cycling and said, guys, if we did a magazine combining running and triathlon and cycling, it could be really popular. And I'll never forget, they both told me the same thing. We would never put a skinny runner on the cover of a magazine. Triathlon is a fad. It'll be gone in 5 years. This is 1987. And the only sport that really matters is cycling. So we came home, and Larry White, Ron Marola, Joe Ellis, those guys gave us $17,000 and said, go start your own magazine. And that was in May of 87. And in June of 87, we launched Competitor Magazine. And I didn't pay her myself, or Lois didn't pay herself for the first year and a half. I lived on friends' floors. Our first print bill was $20,000. We were in the hole $3,000 after the first issue of the magazine. We were in a guy's garage under 20,000 pounds of bike racks, paying $200 rent a month out of our savings. So we had no idea where this was going to go, but we knew we loved this sport, and we knew if we loved it, other people would love it as well. We hope.
Did you think,
they would love it.
Bob? Did you think? I mean, business is business, and obviously, money runs things and pays the bills. Was there a time when you're going, God, I hope my passion isn't overriding my thought process on whether or not this is going to be profitable, whether or not we're going to be able to, get off our friends' floors?
Yeah.
Was it the passion? It just kept pushing you through, and finally, the money started coming?
Yeah. It was really more along the lines of we believed, and we could see these races growing. Right. We could see them growing. We go to LA. I remember going to LA. So funny because in San Diego, if they had a 10K and a 5K, the 5K was a fun run. The 10K was the real event. And the 5K was for granny and for people
kids
who were walking and that type of thing. Lois and I would go to LA, and it was just the opposite. The 5K was where all the racers were, and the 10K was for people jogging. And so I remember telling Tim Murphy, it's like, Tim, LA is so different than San Diego. The 5K is really a cool distance, and people are racing it. And the Carlsbad 5,000 became, when Tim launched the 5,000, people here were like, who's racing a 5,000? Everybody's racing 10K, not 5K. So just things kept happening. The United States Triathlon Series had started in 82. So that was a growing entity that was in California. And when we first started Competitor, we were just in California. And we could see that our sports, mountain biking, was just getting going.
Right.
Ned got a sponsorship from Schwinn as a mountain biker. And then next thing you know, he's the main guy at Specialized. And so we could see that was happening. Then Xterra came along and adventure racing. And we were there at the cutting edge of every single one of those new innovations. And then, okay, all these people are doing these things. There was only one nutrition company at the time, Gatorade. Well, a company called Metrex came on board. And they came on board and sponsored a woman. They sponsored Paula Newby Frazier, which was unbelievable. But it was like, okay, now there's Power Bar. And funny Power Bar story, we're at the Tinsel 5K down in Balboa Park. And I'm standing there passing out competitor magazine. It's probably like, I might have been running in Triathlon News, maybe 86, 85. Next to me, passing out power bars, is Brian Maxwell.
Brian Maxwell.
And next to him is Phil Tauber from Kashi, who's spooning out Kashi cereal. And you remember those early power bars were, during the winter, those things were like freaking bricks. So we're taking the power bars and putting them on the dashboard of the car, right? And turning the defroster on to warm them up enough so Brian could cut the power bars to hand them out to the runners. And Phil's spooning the Kashi and I'm handing out the magazine. We're like, we love this. I wonder if we'll ever make a living doing this. And Phil sells for 75 million, Brian sells for over 400 million, but we didn't know that at the time. We were doing something that we cared about, loved, and felt we were making a difference. I think that was part of it, was when we were writing articles about a Jim Knob or a David Bailey or a Mark Allen or Dave Scott, we were storytelling, which is what I've always loved to do. And it gave me that platform to do that. And that led to the radio show, and that's all that type of stuff. You did things that you felt were right. I felt it was right that our sport, our athletes need to be treated like baseball players, football players, basketball players.
I think that was, and that for me, and I know for you too, was always the frustrating part. We'd see these performances of our great triathletes and great runners, and they'd get this much in the San Diego Union or the Boston, it wasn't, we didn't have the Boston Marathon out here or anything like that. But don't you think when all of a sudden 1989 came along and you had Mark and Dave go out there and run, low 240s, and that kind of woke up the other sports. Wait a minute. They just ran a 240 something and off the bike. Yeah,
they're still running.
I know they're still running. I can't find mine. I wish I could find mine. I don't know. The only one I got, I figure, what the hell? I got my own now, so I don't.
Oh, you got a bobblehead?
Yeah, they gave it to me in Florida.
I
Look
love
at that.
that.
The hat turned backwards.
I like it.
Yeah, enough of that. Yeah. So didn't you think that was all of a sudden kind of the turnaround year for us? Because what you could write about that, Bob, went on for ages about that race.
Well, and what was great about that is, one, when we started, actually in 1990, I started the radio show, and the whole idea was going to Mighty 690 here in San Diego and saying, what is your, you guys are really busy during the week. How's your weekends? How is Sunday night? Because I want people to listen to an interview with Wayne Gretzky, Magic Johnson, and then hear an interview with Dave Scott, Mark Allen, and think, oh, they must be important. They're on sports radio with the same guys I listen to, I follow all the time. And a lot of that was because of you think about ABC Wild World of Sports. So it's 3 networks back then. And in 82, 83, 84, 86, 87, and 89, Mark Allen and Dave Scott were must-see TV, right? We're talking 7 times. So people were watching these same athletes. There was only 3 networks. When you're living back in Pittsburgh, you're watching anything where there's palm trees. You're looking at any show that has palm trees. You don't know what triathlon is. You can't spell it. You have no idea where Kona is, but you know that it's freezing outside, and those 2 guys are bad mofos because they're going side by side that entire day. And that the culmination of that, the fact that that Mark had lost to Dave every time he raced him there, and he beat him everywhere else. And so it was like Mark ruled the world and Dave ruled Kona. And then in 80, leading into 89, you sort of knew that something special was going to happen. And I remember reaching out to both of them in March. Go, guys, I want to do a showdown on the Kona coast.
Yeah.
I want to do that cover shot and run that on the October issue of Competitor Magazine. And they're like, great, no problem. And Dave's like, have Mark come here to Davis. We'll do the shoot. And then Mark's like, have Dave come here to Boulder. We'll do the shoot. And I'm like, so Dave Epperson, the photographer, set up a backdrop, drove to Davis, shot Dave, drove to Boulder. And this was big time. We transposed the photo. We put those two guys together on the cover of the magazine, even though they weren't together. And, Dave said, people forget that Dave Scott was the ultimate smack talker. That guy was the best. And
he still is.
I was like, oh, it still is. I said, Dave, so what do you think is going to happen this year? And remember in 88, Scott Molina ran a 3:02 marathon to win the race. And he goes, I'll tell you something that's not going to happen. If somebody runs a 3:02 marathon, they're going to be 3 miles down the road. And someone's going to run low 240s, and there's only 2 of us who can do that. It was like, okay. And Mark's reading that going, I think he's talking about me. And if he's going low 240s, and at that point, Dave's course record on the marathon, I think, was 249. If someone's going low 240s and Dave's going to go do that, I better be ready to do that as well. And if you look at what we're doing now, if Mark and Dave were racing today and swam 50 minutes like they do now, they'd be right there. The marathon, those guys with transition running 240, 241 was really 238, 239. So they would be, based on what Gustav just did, running 236, those guys would be 2 minutes off of what they did, of what they're doing now in 1989. Now, Mark's fastest bike ride was 4:28. So it's all about the bike in terms of how much faster people are going now than they were back then. Those guys, and Dave was always that guy saying, why aren't they running faster? Based on running 108, 109 off the bike for a half, they should be running sub 230. And it hasn't happened yet, but it's getting closer.
Yeah, it is definitely getting closer. I mean, the progression that we're seeing right now, and we talked a lot about the past, and I do want to jump into the present and the future, but there is something I want to ask you because we mentioned, Competitor Magazine and then CAF, the Challenge Athletes Foundation. Bob, you think that is the most gratifying project of your career?
No question. When just being at the office today, and Rudy Garcia Tolson, who was born with pterygium syndrome, was the first kid we worked with at the age of 7. Right. He's now 34 and works at CAF.
I know.
And he's changing lives. And that's just seeing what an amazing young man he has become and what a role model he is. It's yesterday we had the Cal Berkeley Tri Club at CAF. And I told a little history of CAF and led into Rudy, and Rudy was there passing his leg around to all those guys. And it's just seeing our athletes coming from a point of trauma. A lot of times when we first meet people, it's the lowest point of their life. And watching them rise from there, and Lauren Parker, who you called across the line this year, paralyzed in 2017. This year won Ironman St. George and Ironman Kona and the World Championship and took a silver medal the year before at the Paralympics. It's seeing people come from the rock bottom and come back and then just doing it and being so proud of them, not just proud of themselves, proud of the accomplishment, but understanding they have an obligation to help that next person who was at that same low spot they were. That's what I'm proudest of is the young people who've been with us and where they are now and how they understand that there is a bigger purpose. We've helped you. Your job is to help that next person. And that's, when you now raised, we're going into our 30th anniversary. $147 million raised, 40,000 grants set out to athletes in 73 countries, all 50 states, and more importantly, in 104 different sports. I didn't know there were 104 different sports. Wheelchair basketball, beep baseball, sled hockey, para-Nordic skiing. It's unbelievable.
It's endless.
And just seeing our kids back in the day, would cover their prosthetic legs, right? They didn't want people to see them. Rudy talked about that. When he was younger, he would see kids from school and he wouldn't want to get out of the car because we knew when he got out of the car, they'd make fun of him. Now our kids are comfortable looking at having Superman logo on their leg, right? Scooby-Doo on their leg. Their leg makes them different in a positive way. The wheelchair is just a thing to get them from point A to point B so they can go and get in their WCMX chair, which is wheelchair skateboarding, or go hand cycling, or off-road e-assist hand cycling is the new thing, Mike. When you're wheelchair bound, the trails disappear because you're in a wheelchair and you're pushing a push rim. Your hands are in the dirt. It's non-functional. So now all of a sudden you get an off-road e-assist hand cycle. You go out in the trails, out of Penasquitas Canyon, wherever you want, on your own with the e-assist. It gives you freedom and independence, which is really what sport provides.
It's almost like their version of a gravel bike.
Totally. It is their version of gravel bike. Yep. Yeah. It exists. And that's the coolest thing is we've seen it right in this day and age. Jim McLaren would be on a recumbent E hand cycle, right?
Yeah.
And back then, the technology wasn't there, but now it is. And the positive is the technology is way better than it's ever been. I won't call it a negative, but it's expensive. So back in the day when we were buying $2,500 racing chairs or $5,000 hand cycles, an off-road e-assist hand cycle is $25,000. So it's changing, and we've raised 147, but we want to keep raising a lot more.
Bob, my hat's always been off to you for that because to be able to give back to the community and see what they do on their own when they're just giving that little spark of hope. It's everything. And congratulations to you always for doing that.
Oh, thank you.
Running.
You've been a big part of that. One of my favorite things was when you and myself and Dick Enberg were emceeing at the San Diego Triathlon Challenge that year. I mean, you and I were sort of the same way. Dick Enberg could order lunch and I want to listen to the guy. Right? We were standing there, it was like he'd be reading something and one of us was supposed to come on next. And we're like, I'm not stepping in on that guy. That guy's a legend, man. I'm just going to step back and let him read my part.
Yeah, that was, he was an idol. And so you're right. I remember he'd step away from the podium and we'd look at each other. Whose turn is it? I don't want to go up there.
Dick, why don't you just keep going?
Yeah, really.
We'll go sit in the audience for a while because, you're Dick Enberg.
Hold on, everyone. We'll be right back after a message from our sponsors. Curad, the official medical supplier of Ironman. Let Curad keep you strong so those strains and pains of training and you trying to find your finish line go away. With their wraps, races, and tape, and especially their far infrared kinesiology tape that'll keep you strong through all your training. Check out their products today on Amazon.com, at Walmart, and Ironman.com, and let Curad help you find your finish line. Yeah, the growth of the sport, Bob. Running's got a good, obviously, feeder system from high school track and field and cross country, and obviously a lot of 5Ks and 10Ks. Race companies like Ironman and others, they put on their kids events and youth events. And then we've got the college women, triathlon teams now, which is fantastic. But in triathlon, do you think that's enough of a feeder system to help grow our sport, to get younger people into our sport so they become pros like the Sam Longs of the world? Do you think we have enough at the bottom level there to grow our sport?
I think, to be honest, I think it's great what they've done with the NCAA program. But if I'm looking at return on investment, well, yesterday we had 65 members of the Cal Berkeley Tri Club. That's their club program. They have 150 members of that team who love our sport. When you go out I love going to the collegiate races during the winter. Right. We have the Triton Man UCSD event. The following week is one up at UC Irvine. And you'll have all these clubs from USC, UCLA. To me, I would like to see more money going into that than into an NCAA program is fine. I think there's more return on investment because think about the Cal Berkeley folks. Those guys are going to be filling up our corrals. If they stay in our sport, they are going to. I've always looked at our race directors as the endangered species. It is a very difficult thing to be a race director in the sport of triathlon. You got to find a body of water. You need lifeguards. You got to block off roads. People are going 35 miles an hour. Then the body of water needs to be somewhere near where you can have block off roads. It's very difficult. And I'm concerned we've had a lot of race directors go away. Steve Tomboni out of Indiana used to put on 27 triathlons. He puts on 0 now. He puts on trail runs during the winter because it's easier. And he says, Bob, I go to the start. I basically say go, and then I go to the finish line. I'm not worried about somebody in the swim, somebody on the bike ride. Our sport is very difficult to put on, and I think our race directors need more support. I think they need more support from the governing body. I think the governing body should be doing more. Rather than putting on their own events in Long Beach and in Milwaukee, they should be using local race directors to put those on, to put money in their coffers. Because those guys, if they go away, we don't have a sport.
I know.
We need the race directors.
It's interesting because even at the very top, obviously, if people say, well, they want to do an Ironman race or they want to do Challenge Roth or they want to do a PTO event, whatever it may be, those people have to come from somewhere, especially 10 or 15 years from now.
Yes.
That's what scares me. At 10 to 15 years from now, where are they going to come from?
Well, and it's interesting, Mike, because I've been this proponent of pool triathlons forever, where you start with, if there's a pool in your community, there's a community, right? There's people there. So these are 5K run, 10 or 12 mile bike ride, 150 yard swim in a pool. And when I realized how cool these events were, is I brought McKeely Jones, Ironman world champion, Olympic silver medalist, Paralympic gold medalist, guiding Katie Kelly in 2016, one of the most decorated triathletes in history. But like me, she loves to race. And she would come out to the Tinsel Triathlon with me every year. We're out there. There's a guy, obviously, when you're doing these races, you don't need a $5,000 bike. You can take a bike that hasn't seen the light of day since Reagan was president and bring that thing out, right? And you need a pair of goggles. You need a pair of shoes. You could have bought a Big 5. That's it. Helmet. So we're out there at the Tinsel Triathlon, and there's a guy who's come, obviously, first triathlon. Belly hanging out. He's got his board shorts, bike with the high bars, got a koozie on it. And McKeely's helping him set up his transition area, putting his towel down, and he's like, what a nice young girl. He has no idea, Olympic silver medalist. What a nice young girl. So he finishes the race, did his first triathlon, right? And the race director is making announcements. He's going, hey, everybody, thank you so much for being here. By the way, the Ironman is going to be on TV today on NBC. You should tune in and watch it. And this guy in his board shorts with his belly hanging out, with his bike with the koozie on it and the high bars, his wife says to him, honey, what's the Ironman? And he goes, without hesitation, same thing I just did a little longer, right? So in his mind, if Jan Frodeno or Sebastian Kienle, anybody came up to him right then, they're the same. I'm part of the fraternity. We are all the same. And you think about when you have a race that costs $50, $60 to do, that you don't need a lot of great equipment to do, that you're not in open water where you can drown, where someone can play bongos on your head, where, you can get lost and glare and seaweed and kelp and big fish. All the negatives are in the swim. So you eliminate all that and you swim, you jump into a body of water that's a pool with lifeguards and lane lines. And you come out of the water and you're feeling great about yourself because you're the same as Jan Frodeno. You just did a triathlon. Well, to me, those are the things we should be investing in to get brand new people out to try our sport. Because once they do it, they love it. And our sport changes lives for the better every single day. You and I both know the orthopedic reality is if you're a runner and you get to 50, your best days are behind you. You're not running faster at 55 than you were at 50. So if you incorporate swimming and cycling into your lifestyle along with weight room, one, you'll be weightlifting, you'll be fitter, you'll be faster, you'll run less, you'll run forever. And this sport of triathlon, you'll be able to get faster. I can get a better wetsuit. I can buy faster wheels. I can get plated shoes. And I can run less and run forever and race better using what I developed. I use my engine for swimming and cycling. That will help my running. So it is our sport is the fountain of youth. And it's a sport that people can do forever and ever and ever. And we don't do enough to make that known to the general population.
Because you're right. Because when somebody does become a convert, no matter if they're 20 years old, 30 years old, or 50, I think it was Ironman Arizona. A woman come up to me, Mike, I'm doing my first Ironman. I said, how old are you? She goes, I'm 64. I did my first triathlon 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And everybody talks about injuries, but I'm just having a fun old time. She had no big base of anything.
Nope.
She learned by going to a tri club, the social part of it, and you talked about it earlier. The social aspect of our sport, I think, is one of the strongest friendships that you can have in your life, because you've got that camaraderie, and people actually have gone into tri clubs who mentally they were having a tough time. They wanted to go change their lives, and it happens every day, Bob. It's amazing.
I call our sport an equal opportunity abuser because it doesn't care if you're missing a leg, missing an arm, if you're overweight, if you're dealing with depression or Parkinson's or whatever the hell. It doesn't matter. It's get from point A to point B, and you're a triathlete. In your case, you are an Ironman, right? I know, trademark Mike Riley, 2012.
Yeah. No, that was 1991. I wish.
Somebody asked me the other day, he says, what do you think about Mike retiring? I'm like, hey, if someone would pay me a lot of money to say 4 words, I think I could do that job. You're an Ironman. Give me $10,000. You're an Ironman. What the hell? I said, he's retiring from the easiest job on the planet. You are an Ironman. It's 4 words. That's all you do.
Well, I don't know.
Where's the challenge?
I remember you and Kona coming up to me a few times, and it was like 11:45, and he goes, you'd look at me and go, how the hell are you doing this?
Oh.
I'm dying over here. And I went to dinner, So.
I watched the early part. I went and got 18 holes in, came back, watched the finish a little bit. I'm like, okay, this midnight thing is ridiculous. And then when they starting people in waves, and now you're out there till 1 in the morning.
God.
Like, no.
The last person to go in the last few years, I go, what are we doing? 12:55. Oh
my God. Which means, it's 12:55 means people are still staggering in at 1:55. You're like, oh my God, what am I going to do here? Yeah, no. What
for
you
the love
do
of it. For the love.
Is amazing.
Bob, I've had questions, people, about the retirement. And I never mentioned the word retirement. I don't like it. But one I got about 3 weeks ago. So, Mike, you're retiring. Does this mean Bob Babbitt's retiring with you?
I've had, how many people have asked me if I'm retiring? So, hey, so I hear you're retiring. Retiring. This is retirement. I sold my magazine. I sold it twice. I sold Competitor. I sold Competitor Group. I'm never retiring. Come on. I retired from business. I didn't retire from the fun stuff we love to do. But I can do that 4-word thing. If somebody wants me to say the 4 words, give me $20. I'll come call you an Ironman. It's not a big deal.
You're the guy that takes $10 from people when they want their picture taken with Mike Riley when they mistake you for me. So
I know. Which happens all the time. How many airports? But you know what? I raised the price to 20 because it was
good.
They didn't care. They didn't care.
Split it with me. Let's talk about the businesses of the event companies. So we've got obviously Ironman, you've got Challenge, you've got Clash, you've got Collins Cup and the PTO, and I have always said, and I've been in sales my whole life too, and competition can only make one stronger and one better.
Absolutely.
Do you think the competitive nature of all the companies right now are good for the sport or not?
I think it's a great era to be a pro triathlete because what PTO is doing with the pregnancy benefits, I think that's
beautiful. Yeah.
Game changing. Game changing. And Chelsea Sodaro said it so well.
Yep.
Also, I think over the years you had the United States Triathlon Series, and then we had the Toyota Cup and Lifetime Fitness, and you had all these Olympic distance non-draft for your Olympic format pros to go to Olympic distance non-draft, and eventually, if they wanted to go 70.3 and go full Ironman. Well, when that stuff all went away, when the whole Lifetime series in terms of dollars went away, people were forced to step up to 70.3. And that's like saying, you're running a 100-yard dash and now you got to go do an Ironman to make a living. And it's like, that's a tough transition. Mm-hmm. So right now, if you're a pro and you are doing WTCS races, World Triathlon Championship Series races, and you're going for the Olympics, you can also jump in and do Super League. And because of the speed you have, and we've seen it with Taylor Knibb and Katie Zafar, some people making that transition, Flora Duffy, they come in at 70.3 or the PTO races, which are a little shorter, and they can do really well at those. And it's always great. As much as I love the Ironman distance, I'd like to see pros do less of them. I'd like to see them come to Kona or come to Nice, wherever the Worlds are going to be, with only one other Ironman under their belts, because then people aren't burnt out. I want to see people have longer careers. And right now, when I was interviewing Sam Long recently, we were talking about this year. He goes, I might not be doing a 70.3 this year, because when PTO comes out with their races, if they have the Canadian Open, U.S. Open, Asian Open, and European Open, if they have 4 Opens plus the Collins Cup, and each one of those Opens is $1 million prize purse, people can make a living just on that and not have to do other races, or they can mix and match. I think it's a great opportunity. From an age group perspective, I'm concerned just here in San Diego. Think about, we lost Wildflower, we lost Imperial Beach, we lost Carlsbad, we lost Desert Tri, we lost Super Frog, Super Seal. That's a lot of races that are gone. LA Tri isn't happening this year. So you see races going away, and those are the shorter distance races. Those are our feeder, our welcome mat events. It makes it tougher for people to become a triathlete and find a place to race at. Now, the positive of that is less events. Hopefully, those events will fill up, right? Because there's less opportunities out there. But if San Diego's a hotbed of triathlon, and between Camp Pendleton, we've got San Diego International, we've got Spring Sprint, Solana Beach, and
Oceanside,
Mission Bay. Maybe there's 7 triathlons in San Diego, the hotbed of the sport. That's not healthy.
Yeah, and there's guys like Mark Walter out of the East Coast, which Mark does a fantastic job with about 8 or 9 triathlons there, and I always take my hat off to him because he's figuring out a way to keep it strong, and he's actually in a area which isn't as big as San Diego, yet he's putting on just as many events. You're right. I think it's the area, but the race directors stand up. What I don't want to see is athletes coming into the sport, and the second triathlon they do is a 70.3. I don't think that's good for them.
No, the deal is it used to, and this is one of the things that's concerning. It used to be you come in, you do a sprint, you do Olympics, you take a few years to move up to potentially 70.3, or you stay it short. You move up to 70.3, do full. Now what happens is it becomes a bucket list. I want to get an MDOT tattoo. I want to be an Ironman. So they get a coach, and what coach is going to say, I'm not going to train you? He's going to say, I want to do an Ironman within a year. And they're going to give them a training program and get them to an Ironman or 70.3 within a year, and then they're gone. It isn't a lifestyle, it's a bucket list item. And that, to me, is problematic in terms of somebody staying long-term in our sport. From Race Place days that every time a race is over, you've got maybe 15, 20% who are coming back next year. Oh, yeah. You've got to get all these new people to fill up your corral. Well, where are they coming from? If there's not races out there, if people aren't finding out about it, if we don't have the runners moving from running to triathlon, then triathlon can be hurting. And I think some of the things, rather than focusing on the pool triathlons, that's the other part of that is, with those pool triathlons, the shorter races, a lot of our issues that we talk about, diversity, cost, those go away. They're immediately 50% men, 50% women. They're immediately more people of color, and they're because people aren't afraid of doing these events because you're in a pool rather than open water. It brings a whole new group of people in the sport who want to be triathletes. It is sexy to be a triathlete. It is a sport that has a lot of panache to it, but people feel, oh my God, I can't do 70.3 or full Ironman. I'm out. I'm not getting in, and I'm having to take out a loan to pay the entry fee. I'm paying installments to do a race. That's like, oh my God, that's a little different than we've ever seen before.
And the other part of it is too, you've got a lot of lapsed triathletes. I mean, they're in their 30s and they get married, they get a partner, they have children. It's very difficult to go out and train for those bigger events when you're trying to raise a family and produce income. So feeder events also take care of those mid-level triathletes that have maybe done an Ironman but can't do one again for another 10 years because they've got life commitments.
They got life.
But they don't want to stop doing triathlon. They don't want to because there's not enough events with that. Well, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the Ironman split between Kona and Nice. So many different opinions out there, and people have been pounding me, and I don't. I mean, me as well. I don't work at the company. I'm not going to be doing that anymore. But like everything, we've seen so many things happen in our sport, Bob, that have raised a lot of concern. But the factions have always come together at the end. I think in a few years this will be all over. I mean, whatever direction it goes, Kona I think is sacred, and it always will be in my book. Mm-hmm. It cannot not be sacred in my book. Moving the race, I just don't know how I feel about it. It hasn't digested yet. What about for you?
Well, what's interesting to me is in 2019, nobody was saying after that race, man, if in 2020 we have to have two separate days or the sport won't be successful. It was COVID that closed everything.
Yeah.
So the reality is if you have 2,500 people who are doing the race in 2019, and it's men and women, and we want the male pros out there cheering the women pros on. We want everybody on race day to be cheering each other on and sharing the course together. That's what's made Ironman so special. I mean, 2 days, I get it, but I think there's ways to do it without making it 2 days. There's really no reason you can't have the women start a little. If we're worried about the men and women in terms of the drafting, in terms of the men age groupers catching the women, so you separate them a little further. I don't think that's hard to do. I would personally, because Ironman, and I think Cam Murph is the one who emailed me this. He's like, listen, everybody wants to do Kona. That's the race we all grew up with. And Daniela Reeve said it as well. She goes, it's not the Ironman World Championship all everybody wants to do. Everybody wants to do Ironman Hawaii. That's what we grew up on. That's what we want to do. So when you look at it from the perspective of, okay, we had COVID for a couple of years. Let's go back to 2022, 2023 to do men and women together on one day. If it's too impactful on the island to have 5,000 people there, I get that. It'd be doing a Thursday. There's school, there's work, there's other things going on. Have the race on Saturday, and if they need to bump up the entry fee because it's you're not going to another market and doing 3,000 people in one market and 3,000 in another, well, charge more for that experience of racing in Kona and having men and women together. I think from a media perspective, going to two separate markets makes it hard. I think from a sponsorship perspective, from a family perspective, what if mom and dad both qualify and this is a family thing? Now you have to make a choice. Is dad going to race world championship this year or mom? It's from a financial perspective, I totally get it. If Ironman watched what happened with the WTCS, whatever it's called, the championships they did in Abu Dhabi or Dubai, they're getting a lot of money to go to other markets to bring the championships there. And we saw that with World Cup. So there's a lot of opportunity from a financial perspective for these for the Ironman. They've got a property, the World Championship. that resonates. They can take it anywhere they want, and people will pay for it. But I feel bad for someone like Jan Frodeno, who wanted to finish his career by doing Kona. So now he has to wait another year and come back when he's 42, 43.
Yeah.
Of course you can't do it around one person, but I would like to see everybody still in Kona. To me, obviously, I wrote the 25th, 30th, and 40th anniversary books on it. It's a part of my heart and soul, as it is yours. And calling something an Ironman World Championship, St. George was a wonderful event. I think it still didn't have the feel that Kona had. It's just different. It's hard to replace history overnight.
Yeah, St. George had a great feel for St. George. It was more than any other North American race, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
But still that notch below Kona. Just because it's not Kona, that's all. No knock on St. George. I absolutely adore the place. But
I love it. It's the best. But again, it was also in May. So usually you're sort of finishing your season.
Yeah.
So, Daniela and Christian, did they get the buzz that they got with Chelsea and Gustav in October? It's different, right?
Yeah.
They certainly got buzz. I just don't think it's as much.
So does Bob
I think it's
Babbitt?
going to be interesting.
Does Bob Babbitt have another book in the making? You mentioned the 20th, 30th, 40th.
I don't know, 45th, 50th anniversary of Ironman. But what'll be interesting, if I'm doing a 50th anniversary book, then what do you do with the last 6, 7, the next 5 or 6 of them where you're splitting them up? I have to figure that out. It's been, we've got so much going on this year with the show. We ended up doing 300 interviews over.
I just can't believe you did 300 interviews.
We did 300 interviews.
I'm just proud to have been like 4 of them, for goodness sakes.
So much fun. You know what? I get energized every time we talk to an athlete, because you relate to this as well. The people watching at home are age group athletes, and they think that our pros, Jan Frodeno, was identified at the age of 8 like LeBron James and went to some professional triathlon camp and was nurtured and fed and trained and went through all that stuff. When they find out that the guy was surfing as a kid, and his mom was worried he was going to drown in the surf in South Africa, so put him into swim lessons, and then ended up becoming the greatest triathlete in the world. It doesn't happen. Or Chelsea Sodaro, who was running and realized all these stress fractures. Oh, I'm doing all the cycling and swimming. Maybe I should jump in the triathlon. And 6 years later, she's a world champion. People can relate to those stories because the sport changed our top pros' lives because they were age groupers. Lucy Charles was an age grouper before she became Lucy Charles.
Even back in the day, Lori Bowden raced with her mom, and all of a sudden, we're in Australia, and I'm clocking her, and I'm thinking, oh my God, she's going to run sub 3. And when she did, I just thought it was a miracle. But she was, it just happens over and over in our sport. And the age group stories, Bob, that's what has always thrilled me, because obviously I've been with every one of them for so many years at the finish lines, and their stories of overcoming unsurmountable odds and having to go out and raise a family and work 40, 50 hours a week and get the training in. And that's why I think they love it when they see you at a race racing all the time, because they know how busy you are, for goodness sakes. And there you are racing every weekend. It's a beautiful thing.
And they all love kicking my ass, which is always great.
Well, that's always great, yeah. Hey,
and they do. Every one of them.
You got any regrets through the years?
Any regrets?
You got any regrets? Maybe something you wish.
I regret the fact that this aging thing has happened so fast.
Oh,
what the hell? Yeah. I want to go back. I want to be 28 again. I want to do 28 again and do all this stuff over again, right? You know what? I don't think you can live with regrets. It's I feel like you do things. It's funny. My wife Heidi, put a calendar together for me, and it was one of the greatest gifts I ever got, because every month, like the first month, is Jim Knopp, and just photos of us and what he meant to me, and then Rudy, and then Jim McLaren, and then Emmanuel, and it's like, it sort of puts in one place the lives you impacted a little bit along the way, and at the end of the day, that to me is what it's all about. It's about how you impact other people. If you've impacted somebody and put a smile on their face or helped them achieve something that maybe they couldn't on their own, there's nothing better.
Yeah, it is. I agree, because when you're able to enhance someone else's life, whether you know them or not, I think that's the greatest gift you can give. It really is.
Well, and just think about all those people came across that Ironman finish line, and so many of them went there. And we saw that for sure in New Zealand when they sold 300-400 spots that were unsold because it was going to be your last time there, and people went there for you. And that, now people know that, but we've known it for years. People looked at your schedule and decided where they're going to race because they were going to get called across the line by the legend of the sport, and that validated why they were up at 4 a.m. doing their training, why they were pushing themselves, why they were ditching out on family activities because they needed to get their swim in. All of that, and it makes you realize that, Mike, that you were there for a purpose. You were there to elevate this sport to a level it wouldn't have reached without you.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you very much for that. Tri-table racing, that's the final question on Find Your Finish Line. And it comes out of, my good friends, the McMillans that raced the Baja 1000. And afterwards, after they always race, they sit around the table and they call it table racing. They reminisce about the event, what happened over the day and all that good stuff. I call it tri-table racing. So reminisce with us about something that happened at an event, good or bad. It could have been 20 years ago or yesterday. So tri-table racing. We're sitting at the table. Talk to us.
Okay. Probably one of the coolest things in terms of being an idiot. Okay. So at the Santa Barbara Triathlon, we're doing it as a relay. And a little backstory. So Tinley and I, Scott Tinley, 2-time Ironman world champion, we're in the same town and sort of giving each other crap whenever we can. And I was driving down Mission Boulevard down in San Diego, and Tinley is on his bike, pulls in front of me, and pulls his bike shorts down, and is mooning while he's standing in the pedals. What he doesn't see is a cop pulling up next to me, right? And next thing you see is, "Hey, Happy Pants, want a ticket?" from the cop, right? And Tinley almost falls off his bike. So flash ahead, we're doing the Santa Barbara Triathlon, and they let the relay teams go off at the same time as the pros.
The relay
So I'm on a relay team. I had Jody Durst, who was the cyclist, and this guy Dave, who was our designated thick guy who could handle the swim and was way off the front. Jody was way off the front. So I'm leading. I'm doing the run. I'm leading the 10-mile run. People think I'm winning the race, and I'm running along. And who comes up behind me while I'm in my glory? People are doing the wave, and you guys winning the race. He's winning the race. Tinley comes up behind me and pantsed me right in the middle of the 10-mile run. And he's like, "Hey, Happy Pants, your turn." Oh my God!
I'm glad it was a Tinley story. I got a call from him right after the announcement and everything. Well, a few weeks after the announcement, he goes, "Riley, yeah, you retired?" I go, "Yeah, I guess so. I'm not going to be on the microphone." He goes, "It's about time. I'll see you later. I got to go." And that was the conversation.
When I would interview him, he was the absolute worst. Because, when you're interviewing people, they're pretty engaged back and forth. Tinley is the ultimate in trying to multitasking. So I know he's packing while I'm interviewing him. So the answers are like, "So how'd that race go?" "It was good." And he's just packing. I can hear him packing crap. And I'm like, "Dude, we're on the air. This is an interview. You're supposed to be engaged." Nah, he's packing to go on his trip or whatever the heck he's doing.
Yeah, I missed that with you and Huddle on Sunday nights, and you had me on once, and I think we got 4 words in because we were laughing the entire time. Well, Bob Babbitt, thank you very much. I mean, you're the godfather of the sport. You're our patron saint. You're the one that keeps this thing all gelled together. You've always been in everybody's camp, which I think is probably the best philosophy in the world because it helps our sport grow. So thank you very much for your time today, Bob, and I can't wait to be together with you again somewhere.
Love you, brother. Anytime, anywhere, man. We're always linked. Zebra tuxes forever.
I know, forever and ever. And thank you to all of you for tuning in again to another edition of Find Your Finish Line. Always remember, you're the cause of your own experiences. You keep those positive, and I guarantee you'll find your finish line. Take care of yourselves, everyone. Aloha.